Hello, dolphins, and welcome to our next flip notes. With these flip notes, we're going to be talking about plant survival. In order for plants to survive, they have to go through several different things. Let's go through the slides and discuss each one individually. In this slide, we're going to talk about the environment and how the environment can affect the survival of the plants. So changes in the environmental conditions can affect the survival of either an individual organism or individual plant or an entire species of plant. So if it's too hot outside and this is a type of plant that needs it to be kind of warm but not too cold, then that plant is possibly going to die. If it's too cold and the plant needs a warmer condition, then again, it's going to cause it to die. In the next two slides, we're going to be talking about dormancy and germination. Dormancy is basically when a seed is still a seed and it hasn't grown into a plant yet. It is a period of inactivity. So a period of inactivity for a mature seed prior to germination. Germination is when the seed actually begins to sprout. So, when you go to the grocery store or you go to Michael's and you buy packets of seeds that have not been planted in the ground, those seeds are dormant. That means that they have the capability to grow into a plant. They just don't have the right conditions yet. On this slide, I'm going to give you two examples of how seeds go from dormancy to germination. I'm going to start off with the picture on the left-hand side. The picture on the left-hand side is a flowering bulb. There are several types of flowering bulbs, such as tulips, dandelions, and irises. With the flowering bulb, what happens is you plant it in the springtime and you get a beautiful flower in the spring. That's when it germinates. Then, as the fall and the winter come along, it starts to die out. Well, when it dies, basically what happens is it's not dying, it's just becoming dormant, meaning it's going to sleep. When the springtime comes, it wakes up. It starts to germinate. So think about colleges. When you go to a college, students sleep in a dorm. So when a plant is sleeping, it's dormant. It's sleeping in a dorm underground, which is the soil. When it wakes up, it is germination. So it's germinating and growing. If you take a look at the picture to the right-hand side, here again you see a seed. The seed is in the soil. However, it needs the right conditions to grow. So when the seed is just a little seedling, basically it's in the dormant state. However, as you give it the right amount of sun, soil, nutrients, water, it starts to grow. Just like when you have photosynthesis. Because as you know, plants need photosynthesis to grow. As it germinates, it starts to grow and eventually becomes a plant and eventually leads to a flower. Just like animals, plants too try to survive. So what is a plant's goal? A plant's goal is to enhance its survival rate given the environment it's in, responding to the stimuli. Well, what is stimuli? Stimuli are basically things that can cause the plant to react. And in the next slide, or in the next few slides, we're going to learn about responses and stimuli. In this slide, we're going to talk about plant responses. You do not have to write the things that are in parentheses. However, as you're taking your notes, I do want you to write down the things that are underlined. So let's start off with the first thing. So there are three things that basically plants respond to. Number one, growth. So how much will it grow? Will it grow? Will it not grow? It all depends on the environment. Reproduction. Will it reproduce? Well, it all depends again on flowering. If you remember when we talked about flowers, we talked about how flowers help reproduce. Shift in position of roots, stems, and leaves. We're going to actually talk about that in the next few slides. So what does shift in position of root, stem, and leaves mean? It means how will the plant adapt? For example, will the plant move to the left or move to the right if it needs more sunlight? we'll see in the next few slides. Now we're going to talk about conditions, also known as stimuli. This stimuli is what causes the plant to respond. So there are 5 main things that we're going to be talking about in class. There are actually a lot more stimuli that plants can respond to. However, these are the 5 main ones that we will be discussing. Let's talk about the first one, gravity. Gravity basically means that plants always like to grow up towards the sun. So if you take a pot and put it to its side, the plant actually will grow upward towards the sun because the plant needs sunlight. If you take a look at the plant that's next to my window, you'll notice that that plant is also leaning. The reason why my plant is leaning is during the summer, the janitor put the plant in the sink so that she could give it some water and left it in the sink. So the plant started growing up towards the sun and leaning. Sunlight. Obviously, all plants need sunlight, so it responds to sunlight. If it doesn't have sunlight, it's going to try to grow towards sunlight. Temperature. If it's extremely hot, that's like a drought. Basically, the plant is going to wilt and dry up and die. Same thing if it's cold. If it's cold, again, the plant is going to freeze, and if it's frozen, then it's not in the right conditions, and again, it will die. Day length. If you remember when we talked about flowers, we talked about reproduction, and we said that the length of night is what causes flowers to actually reproduce. So obviously, day length and night length affect the plant, because during the day, it goes through photosynthesis. At night, it goes through cellular respiration. All right, and then touch. Some plants, when you touch them, actually fold down or they might open up. For example, a Venus flytrap. If there's a fly, it will keep its mouth open. And then once the fly touches part of the Venus flytrap's mouth, it automatically shuts. So again, that is a stimuli that the Venus flytrap has. So now you may ask, what is the scientific term for when a plant actually responds by bending towards or away from an external stimuli? Well, it's called tropism. Well, this tropism can be either positive or negative. We'll talk about that in the next slide. So what is the difference between positive tropism and negative tropism? Positive tropism is if a plant moves or shifts towards the stimulus. Remember when we talked about the 5 stimuli, the sunlight, the gravity, and so on? Well, if it's moving in the right direction, so if it's moving towards the sun, that's a positive stimulus. If it's moving away from the sun, then that's going to be a negative stimulus. So what is a negative tropism? A negative tropism is when the plant moves or shifts away from the stimulus. So now let's see if we truly understand positive and negative tropism. If you remember, we talked about stimuli. Let's talk about the first one, gravity. If you take a look at the picture in the middle, you see a plant. You have roots and a stem with leaves. The roots have a positive response to gravity because they are growing down. What do we know about gravity? What comes up must come down. So since gravity basically pulls everything towards the earth, then the roots are growing towards the earth. Therefore, they are positive. However, the stem and the leaves are growing up. That's defying gravity because it's growing up. Gravity makes things go down. So that's negative tropism because it's not growing in the right direction. Now, the roots can also have a negative response. Roots move away from the sun, so it is negative tropism for sunlight. Leaves have a positive response to sunlight because they move towards the sun, so that's positive tropism. The next thing that we are going to do is we are going to watch 2 videos. So once you're finished with this PowerPoint and you have completed your notes, in this same section, you're going to watch the 2 videos that follow these notes.